Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our special meeting, our study session with the City of Daly City on Monday, October 8th. Today, we are on our agenda talking about the proposed minimum wage increase, particularly that subject matter. And usually at our study sessions, we don't have any public comment, but I will allow public comment on the floor for about 2 minutes.
Okay, good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. This is actually the second study session on potential minimum wage ordinance to increase wages ahead of the state of California. The recommended action tonight by staff is for council to review and consider options for a potential minimum wage ordinance in Daly City and provide policy direction to staff on next steps in this development. By way of background, at the request of the City Council last year, staff researched options to potentially increase the minimum wage in Daly City, and we also did correspondence with 2 cities in San Mateo County that recently enacted the local minimum wage ordinance as well. We also did a mailer and an online survey to businesses to request their input, and in a second I'm going to have the assistant to the city manager, Stephen Stolte, talk a little bit about the survey that he did. A minimum wage was established by federal, state, and local government law, and it sets the lowest wage an employer may legally pay to their workers. The current state of California law will raise the minimum wage at yearly intervals towards the final target of $15 an hour in January 2023 for all businesses. And the table in your packet shows the schedule for increases. Note that the state distinguishes between employers with 25 employees or less and employers with 26 employees or more, and assigns $1 an hour higher minimum wage to the latter group each year. So you can see in the schedule for California minimum wage rates, we're coming up upon January 1st, 2019, where the minimum wage will be mandated to increase from $11 to $12 an hour. And then below that, you can see the next stages. So 2020 will be 13, 2021 would be 14, and 2022, $15 an hour. Just as a side note, the federal minimum wage for covered non-exempt employees has been about $7.25 an hour since July 24th, 2009. In San Mateo County, currently only 2 cities, the city of San Mateo and the city of Redwood City, have enacted local minimum wage ordinances. Each city has taken a slightly different approach in applying the increases to their business communities. And I will turn it over to Stephen. He worked diligently on getting some of the research on this.
Good evening, City Council. So I'm going to run through really quick City of San Mateo and the City of Redwood City's ordinances. So San Mateo was first in our county to enact a minimum wage ordinance. This was in August of 2016, and it established 2 different schedules for increases based on employers that are nonprofits and employers that are not nonprofits. So that's how they distinguished. And this differs from the state because the state distinguishes based on number of employees. So San Mateo is currently at $13 an hour for not nonprofits, and they are at $12 an hour for nonprofits. This will increase to $15 an hour next year on January 1st for all businesses, and then $13.50 for nonprofits next year. After that, they increase the minimum wage based on the consumer price index. And so they'll give an annual cost of living increase. The city of Redwood City is the only other city in our county that has a local minimum wage ordinance, and they just adopted it this year, actually, in March. So you'll see in your packet, they have, they increase it twice because they're kind of later than San Mateo. And the first increase comes next year. It will be $13.40 an hour for all businesses. And then in 2020, it will be $15 an hour. So that's still ahead of the state of California's schedule. After that, they also use the CPI to do annual cost of living increases. And they have some exemptions for federal and county agencies and school districts. So here in Daly City, when we were doing research, we really wanted to contact the business community and get their feedback. So we did a mailer, and actually the postcard is in your packets. It's just a 4.25 times 6-inch postcard. It's an invitation to take our online survey. That survey was only made available to businesses through this postcard, so it wasn't open to the public. It was just gathering business input. And we mailed it to 5,121 businesses that have an active business license at City Hall. And that was at the end of August. So here we are in October, and we received only 47 responses. So that is a very low response rate.
Yeah.
It's 0.92%. So we can't really generalize about what businesses think based on this data, okay? But maybe we think about it more as a self-selected focus group where business, it just provides a glimpse into what some businesses are thinking. So that might be another way to think about the data. We really can't speculate as to why businesses didn't fill out the survey.
Was the chamber ever involved in the survey?
They were not. We just direct mailed it to the list.
So every business in Daly City?
Every business that has an active business license, yes. We use SurveyMonkey, which is pretty common, and it took respondents an average of 6 minutes to complete, so it was a pretty easy survey to fill out. There were 13 questions that were required. And I'm using the term, like I can go into the results now, and I'm going to use the term respondents instead of businesses, just so we're not generalizing too much. But the majority of respondents were the business owner. Okay, so that's close to 90%. And the largest industry groups that were respondents were the restaurant and food service industry, that's about 28%, professional services at about 23%, and then other unspecified categories were at 34%. So the survey asked about current wages. What are businesses actually paying their employees? And the majority of respondents, over 3/4, already pay their employees an amount higher than the California state minimum wage. And of those respondents, nearly half, at 45%, already pay their hourly employees over $15 an hour. So we also asked about their support for a potential ordinance. And the majority of respondents do not support a minimum wage ordinance in Daly City. So over 3/4 do not support increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour ahead of the state. 68% of respondents do not support increasing the minimum wage to an amount less than $15, but above the current California state minimum wage. And then almost 60% of respondents do not support increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour if phased in over time. So just in general, there was a lack of support among the respondents. We also asked businesses what they would do in the event that we enacted an ordinance. And the majority of respondents would increase prices to consumers. That's 76% of respondents. That's not too surprising. And over half of respondents would reduce employee work hours. Also, we found out that almost 29% of respondents would close their business, and about 24% would move their business to a different city. I have in your packet the full results of the survey printed, and each page is a different question. And so you can kind of look at that for more details. There were some open-ended questions about their thoughts on the ordinance that are captured there as well. Are there any questions on this section?
Any questions from my colleagues?
Yeah.
Councilmember Christensen.
Did you get a variety of people responding in languages other than English?
It was all in English, actually.
All English, yeah. And was there any question about, because we just got this, any question about how many employees you have?
Yes, that's in there as well.
And so what were the statistics on that?
It was all over the place, actually.
Okay.
Let's see.
Or what page should we look on for that?
It's page 3.
Okay.
And it's employee count at your business. There's an average number of how many employees are full-time. The average number is 8, but it's hard to look at the average because it's all over the place. If you look, you know, part-time, the average was 7.
So these are predominantly very small businesses.
Well, let's see. If you're looking at the list, there's a business with 60. There's a business with 33.
Yeah.
16, 12. But yeah, in general, most of the ones on the list are small.
Are under 10.
Yeah, and there's even some that report 0. Probably because they're just the business owner and they're the only employee.
It's a one-person deal,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you, the businesses that objected to raising the minimum wage, do you know if they had provided any kind of health care for their employees?
We did not ask about healthcare.
Okay. And did you have any, other than the survey, the online survey, was there any actual like discussions with the businesses, one-on-one kind of thing, or just by telephone?
No, and that was something we considered. That would kind of be creating a focus group and inviting people to City Hall, having a discussion, or even just phone calls. We didn't do that just for timing, and we wanted to do this first and see what kind of response we got.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the email marketing, the Survey Monkey that you sent out, you sent that out to how many, and do you know what the open rate was?
Well, it was 5 that, it doesn't track open rate because it's not really a newsletter, because that's a paper invitation, so we can't track like click-through on the link. But we just know that 47 filled it out. That's the data we have. We don't have email addresses for all the businesses, otherwise we would have done an email blast too.
So it's really hard to know if it was lack of interest, they're too busy running their business, they don't really feel comfortable divulging information about themselves or their business, or it's hard to know I bet it's a variety of all those things.
It is, and also in these days, before it was like people needed to hear something 3 times before they took action. Now it's up to 7 times, and it's like, okay, our budget's a little too small to do 7 rounds of mailers.
Any other questions for Stephen?
I can also go into the policy options
Okay,
next.
Sure.
So we have 3 options here for you to consider, and we calculated the fiscal impact to the city organization, to our budget for our employees. Okay, we can't calculate the wider economic impact with businesses, but for us, we have the numbers.
So that's on the back of the second sheet of paper in our packet.
Yes. We're on page 4 of 5. So option A is simply to comply with the state's regulations. So that would mean $12 an hour would be the minimum wage next year. And it means we do not pass a minimum wage ordinance in Daly City. And this affects the smallest number of hourly ranges within the city workforce. It's H101 to 105. And that represents about 226 hourly employees. So if you look down in the chart, the fiscal impact in the last column is $110,000 of extra costs in 2019 to bring us up to 12.
Which is coming no matter what.
That's coming no matter what. So it's in there to show you what what that does with our budget. Option B is to set the minimum wage at $13 an hour. This is still ahead of the state of California's schedule, and which mandates $13 an hour in 2020 and 2021, depending on the size of your business. And this affects hourly ranges H101 to 109, so there's 4 more in the mix. And this is 253 hourly employees that would be affected. The fiscal impact in 2019 would be $280,000 extra costs. And then we have option C. This is going straight to $15 an hour ahead of the state. Remember, they're trying to reach that in 2022 and 23. And this affects all of our hourly ranges, 101 to 112, so every single one, and this is 256 hourly employees. The fiscal impact is $600,000 in 2019, extra.
I have a question.
Yes.
On options B and C, that is for all businesses in Daly City.
Yes.
So there would also be that $30,000 charge for enforcement and processing.
Yes, and we will get to those extra costs in
okay.
just a second, but yes,
But
you're
the
correct.
first one, we would not, because it's just Daly City employees.
Right, yeah.
And we can do that ourselves. Okay. Gotcha.
So with any of these options, the way we apply it to our workers is the lowest hourly range, so H101 would be set at the minimum wage, and then each one after that would be bumped up a little bit. okay? The lowest paid employees that are covered by bargaining units are not in this data because they're already paid above $15 an hour. And then also, just a side note, the full effects of wage compaction really aren't captured here for our full workforce, but it is something that we'll have to really kind of dig into later. The department that's affected the most by a local minimum wage ordinance would be library and recreation services. They have the highest proportion of hourly workers in the city. These are often seasonal workers or library aides, lifeguards, and more. And now we can go on to the extra costs and noticing and enforcement. So
You mentioned that it's the Department of Library and Recreation Services most affected, but are there any other departments affected? That
Yes.
I don't see it noted as.
There's hourly workers in almost every department. Public works aides there.
Okay,
Most of the workers are in library and rec, though.
thank you.
Are we, how are we doing on keeping the library workers? And do we have vacancies, and are people applying for the jobs? That's what I want to know.
I believe they're fairly easy to fill, the hourly positions, but I would want to talk to the Director of Library and Recreation as far as the turnover. I think anytime we do an opening, we're able to fill those hourly positions.
Okay.
Yeah, there's all those people that are no longer working in the library because the hours were cut, that I'm sure many of them would love to
Right.
come back.
And it's a good segue for people who are looking for full-time work, which
Okay, so on to noticing and enforcement. So regardless of what amount the potential minimum wage ordinance ends up being, the city will need to create and adhere to an implementation plan. And that includes yearly mailings to the businesses, including bulletins and notices in multiple languages to be posted at workplaces. The exact cost of all those mailers and production and mailing, we don't have those numbers yet. So we can determine them later. But we do know that we don't have a budget for it. So we'd have to appropriate money for that and just be aware of that. In the first year of implementation, the costs are always the highest just because you need to get the word out to everyone and you need to do it multiple times. And so that public outreach and education is really important in year one. So
Yeah.
it will go down after that, but at first the cost will be high.
Well, how much are you going to be asking for that?
For the enforcement, it would be about $30,000 a year, and then all the mailers that come. I mean, I think just doing the survey was a few $1,000s to reach all of those businesses. So you're really looking at the enforcement in addition to the actual cost of raising the salary, and depending on the option, it would be, if you adhere to the state, it's about 110. If you do option B, you can see it in your chart.
280,000 option B.
310.
And 15 is a little bit over 600,000.
I have a question.
Yes.
So, if you stick to the state's plan, then they do the enforcement, or are we still required to do the enforcement?
No, we don't do enforcement. On the state's plan, we don't do enforcement.
So they have to do it?
Yeah, we would only be enforcing on a local ordinance.
Okay.
Okay. And what's interesting is that both the city of San Mateo and Redwood City actually contract with the city of San Jose's
yeah.
Office of Equality Assurance to provide that enforcement service. And they're great because they follow all the best practices recommended by the proponents of minimum wage ordinances. Like, for example, they'll investigate the full payroll of any employer for which a claim is filed against, and not just the individual claim. So it protects the identity of the employee making the claim more. And then they ensure that other violations are addressed that way. So San Mateo has an annual contract at $30,000. I think that's a good number for us to use too. They don't spend the full $30,000, it's just when San Jose provides services, so. And that concludes all the information in the staff report.
Thank you.
Councilmember Sylvester?
I'm first going to start off with page 2 of 5, where you give the breakdown of San Mateo and Redwood City. I have all your numbers here as stated, which leads me to page 4. The question I have is, how many part-time employees does Daly City have?
You can see in the column, Councilmember Sylvester, under options A, B, and C, the number of hourly workers affected. So,
Okay, so that column represents the number of part-time employees or employees that would be affected by this change.
that's correct.
Thank you. At the bottom of the page, it says the lowest paid employees covered by bargaining units are already paid above the $15 per hour,
That's correct.
and as such are not reflected in the above data. I just wanted to make sure that information was correct.
That's right.
All right. Who came up with the various options A, B, and C?
Myself and Stephen tried to come up with a simple way of approaching this kind of complicated task, but we certainly would be open to direction from council.
Thank you. I have a recommendation on a possible increase with the years to come, and kind of a little bit more aggressive than what the state is offering. So I'd like to first start off with January 2019. Redwood City's at $13.40 per hour. I'd like to recommend $12 per hour. For nonprofits, $11 per hour. Commencing January 1st, 2020, $13.50 per hour, and for nonprofits, $12.50 per hour. And we would like to do something a little bit different than what the other cities are doing, but to somehow minimize the impact as much as possible to businesses. The year 2021, where you have Redwood City up to $15 per hour, I would recommend $15 per hour by the year 2021, and for nonprofits, $14 an hour. And if we can work those figures out and the impact for our city workers as to what the difference would be. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Christensen.
I understand that nonprofits have a hard time paying their workers, but nonprofit employees are some of the lowest paid workers. They have no pension plans, so I'm concerned about the employees in those places. So it's a dance, I guess, to see how they can stay alive, but how can you look into someone's eye and say, I'm sorry, you're worth this much, and you're just not. And why are you not? Because you're giving of yourself as a nonprofit agency. I don't know how you do that and keep your morality straight. So I'd like to see them all the same, personally.
Madam Christensen.
Values everybody the same, yeah.
Thank you very much. I was trying to be conservative. And with that in mind, I would definitely entertain that we keep them even across the board for nonprofits and employers with 25 or more.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Sylvester and Councilmember Christensen. At this time, is there any way to get those numbers ran through? Should we have someone be able to see how that will compare to the others at this moment?
Need some time? Want your special? Yeah.
Okay.
And Glenn, can you repeat your numbers and the years?
Right, that.
Just make sure everybody's on the same page here.
For the year January 1st, commencing January 1st, 2019, that we are at $12 per hour.
Mm-hmm.
Commencing the year January 1st, 2020, we are at $13.50 per hour. And by the year January 1st, 2021, that we are at $15 per hour, which according to the California minimum wage rate, we would not hit $15 an hour to January 1st, 2023. So basically, we would be 2 years ahead of the state mandate.
So I thank you for the suggestions, Councilmember Sylvester. In the same manner, I do concur with you around the dollar amounts and also just expediting the hourly rate reaching $15 earlier than the state. For many residents who've heard how important it is around their sustainability in remaining within the Bay Area. And so I think, by expediting it a couple years earlier, it does provide more support for residents and also people living in our city and the workers in order to get, actually, if they're paying rent and then it's high rent at the moment, then what happens is they substitute, they need money for food and healthcare. And so I am agreeable to what is proposed here. I also want to say thank you to the staff. I know that this has been something on the docket for quite a while to study the minimum wage. It was brought up a year ago, and also just wanted to let that everyone know that it was not forgotten, that it's worked on. We're at a stage that I think we're hopefully going to be able to move forward and see what we can do. It's really a result of what we've heard from the community, and we appreciate also the outreach that you've done to the businesses, that you try to get some data. But more importantly, it's definitely important to see kind of how we can help our community, and that's what I've heard very much so, that it's hard for them to kind of remain because of the increase of cost of living. So,
if I may, can I get some clarification on the not-for-profit numbers? I know that Councilmember Christensen brought up.
So I think there is no delineation at this point. What was talked about is keeping the numbers the same amount with all businesses, whether they're nonprofit or a regular business.
Okay. Go ahead.
I have the question because about the size of the business. Because at the state minimum wage, they have one amount for small employers with less than 25 employees, and another one for employers of 26 or more employees. And if you look at the state one, the numbers are almost the same, at least at the beginning. If you are a 26 or more employees, in January 2019, you're at $12. In 2020, it's $13. You'd be proposing $13.50. And in 2021, it's $14, and you'd be proposing $15. So just make it, are we going to talk about less than 25 or more than 25, or just to make sure? I'm thinking you guys need clarity on that.
Just to note, many cities that have done this, they kind of go along with the state with distinguishing businesses based on number of employees. So for us, if the recommendation is to move to $12 in January of 2019, what that means for Daly City businesses is that only businesses with 25 employees or less would be affected, because the state's already covering the larger businesses in 2019 at $12 an hour. So
then I have a problem. I'm definitely concerned about our small businesses with less than 25 employees, and I would not want to hold them to the stringent as if they had more than 25 employees. So what I'm hearing is, if we were to move forward, that would also affect the businesses that are less than 25.
Yes, it at least in 2019, yes, because,
In 2019.
yeah.
But that's really out of our control, the less than 25,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because the state already mandates that, and so,
Well, the state already mandates for January 1st, 2019 at $11 per hour with 25 employees or less.
That's correct.
And it's at $10.50 currently.
Well, I'm more concerned about the businesses with 25 or more.
And also just another interesting thing, not all cities choose the 25 and 26 threshold. Like, for example, Emeryville uses 55. Seattle uses 500 to distinguish between a small and a large business. So it's kind of tailored to the industries present in a city, I think. So most are using the same cutoff as the state, if they're distinguishing at all.
so I think the direction or what's needed is, do we want to create a distinction within the state, or do we want to create something particularly towards Daly City?
By the way, Redwood City did not create any distinction. It's just a blanket minimum wage. San Mateo just did the distinction between nonprofits and then
Okay.
business.
So
You can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
So, or there could be no distinction. I mean, those,
Well, looking at the chart here, we're looking at about $1 per hour difference than what's proposed for January 2019. I proposed $12, and the state is saying $11. So we're looking at $1 per hour. All right,
For the small businesses, yeah.
I'm okay with that.
You're
Across the
okay
board.
With not
Across
making
the
this
board.
distinction, or,
Not making the distinction across the board. I just wanted more clarification as to the differences. So mom and pop stores with 3 or 4 employees would be subject to $1 more.
Correct.
Now, I have a question. A fairly large number of businesses that are family-run, they don't really have employees, but everybody in the family works at the store. So people work, they don't get paid, but they work because the money goes into the family pot. So, and a lot of that's cultural as well, so what's
I don't think,
the talk around that?
I think
mean,
you have.
they pay their business tax, but,
I mean, I think you have that problem regardless of the rate, right?
oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know how we currently don't enforce it because we only abide by the state, but I think you have that same problem regardless if you go ahead of the state.
Oh, yeah, it's not
Yeah.
about the amount.
Right.
But just the realization that there are a large number of businesses, especially small restaurants and very small grocery stores. You'll see the whole family there. Well, there's no childcare, so, it's too expensive. So kids are doing stuff, grandma's doing stuff, everybody's doing stuff. And the business is not actually making a profit. It is merely providing sustenance for a family. And they're not looking at making money, they're just looking at surviving.
Enforcement gets complicated in those cases because
Yes.
it seems like it's claim-driven, like you submit
Yeah.
a claim, and so,
Nobody in the family is going to complain.
and there are noticing requirements and all of that handle the outreach part, but yeah,
Yeah.
the enforcement's tricky.
Well, I'll make this last comment. with the recent news of the articles pertaining to wage theft that occurred here in Daly City, I'm hoping that if we move forward with this, this might send a clear message as well, that Daly City is a place to which we won't tolerate. We want to give folks the opportunity to have a living here, to live in here. I've once heard that no one who works full-time at minimum wage should live in poverty. And subsequently, I believe it's $117,000 now, which is considered low wage. But I think this will add credence to not only paying the folks minimum wage, but we will be also on the lookout for wage theft. I mean, it's another subject, but I think it'll all come into play, come into hand as well. Just my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So if there are no other comments at this time, we need the direction of the council, and so what's being proposed is 2019 at $12 an hour, 2020 at $13.15, 2021 at $15, with no delineation. So I guess we could just go down the line, right?
Public comment?
Oh, let's see, that's right. And then I'm allowing public comment for 2 minutes, so can I, we have all the cards for public comment?
Small businesses really going to apply to them because it's just family.
Okay.
So
Okay. All right.
I think
May I have Miss Raina Lehman?
Thank you for the opportunity to see the council members and staff. Belmont also raised the minimum wage ordinance right here, along similar lines of what we're discussing with no delineation of size. On behalf of the Labor Council and the 11,716 union members who call Daly City home, I rise to urge the City Council to adopt a minimum wage ordinance of 15 by 20 or sooner. Daly City is the largest city in the county with an estimated population of over 107,000, highly diverse city, ethnically, culturally, socially. The median age in Daly City is 39 years old. These are people in prime income earning years, and most people in Daly City are working. 70% of the population is in the labor force and will be affected. About 10% of the households in Daly City, however, earn below the federal poverty level of $25,000 a year for a family of 4. Female-headed households in Daly City fare worse. 18% are below that federal poverty level. The U.S. Census Fact Finder says 30% of the households in Daly City, that's over 9,000 households, are earning under $50,000 a year. Average rent in Daly City, $3,200 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment. Family of 4 in Daly City needs to take home after taxes about $39,000 a year just to pay the rent. $15 an hour is $31,200 a year before taxes and doesn't pay the rent. Takes about 100, you mentioned I think 177, it's up to about $126,000 for a family of 4 with young kids to be self-sufficient in San Mateo County. That would be 4 $15 an hour jobs. 48% of Daly City's economy is tied to traditionally lower paying service and retail jobs. Many local workers would benefit strongly from this modest boost in pay. Hardworking families in this county are facing poverty and insecurity. You do have the opportunity to improve their quality of life. $15 is insufficient, but it's a start. We know local minimum wage increases have multiplier effects, increasing the money spent at local businesses and boosting the local economy without negative impact on businesses. We urge you to join San Mateo, Belmont, Redwood City, who've all passed these ordinances, and the county of San Mateo passed a living wage ordinance about 2 years ago. Facebook raised their minimum wage to $15 2 years ago. Target raised theirs. Amazon, Whole Foods, All of them are up to $15. We suggest a bump in 2019, getting to 15 by 2020 with subsequent annual consumer price index raises. We all have a
Thank you.
vested interest in keeping our county, our city, and our communities vibrant and our workforce healthy. Thank you for the time.
Thank you so much. We have Gabriella Maxman.
Will you just cut me off at 2? Because it's not on. Okay, got it. The one thing that I just wanted to call out, I think it's really important to recognize how expensive it is to live here. From what I understand, most people that live in Daly City don't actually work in Daly City, based on what I've seen. The other thing that I think is kind of important to point out is that this year with Measure BB, we're going to be increasing the business tax on small businesses. And in addition to that, we're going to be raising, based on what I heard, wages by $1. It's going to really impact small businesses significantly. I've talked to a lot of small businesses here in Daly City, and like the survey said, most are ready to leave. When you have Colma that charges $29 for a business tax, and you compare it to Daly City, which charges 1%, businesses are really starting to look elsewhere. And while it's anecdotal, I've probably spoken to close to the same number of businesses that replied, and all have kind of echoed the same, is that they no longer feel that Daly City is friendly to small businesses. And they have a lot of options now where they can have their business. I support a living wage. $12 an hour is not a living wage. $15 an hour is not a living wage. But a lot of small businesses, small business owners are actually earning below minimum wage. Because like Judith mentioned, the whole family is there working, and they're working, upwards of 80 to 100 hours a week just to survive. I don't think that there's a perfect answer or the right solution to the problem, but we should be aware of how the decisions that we make influence small businesses. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Pamela DiGiovanni.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members. First, I want to commend you for taking this action. I know it's long coming. I remember Councilmember Sylvester was spearheading this before. And just a little background, which you guys already know, but probably the public, that when Senator Leno went for this, he had to embattled, you were his proxy, he had to battle them in the state to even get what he did get done. He did get something done. So I applaud you for moving it faster, and if there's a way we can revisit this later, and I'm sure there will be, that we can move it faster. And then the city of San Mateo, and as they pointed out, Labor pointed out, that they didn't see any delineation on, they didn't use the number of businesses. I think Mayor Bonilla and them just made it a flat, and maybe to look in that, they didn't use the number of businesses, 25 or 24. But of course, we are different. We have to look at our area different. We're the lowest socioeconomics. And then, especially if it does with our city workers. So we need to examine that as well, like while we're having part-time workers, and what are they making? And then they don't get the benefits, and why are they being treated like that too? So we gotta make sure that if we have In-N-Out that's given $16 an hour and benefits at part-time, Starbucks gives that, we need to be equity. And I know that the council will look into that as well moving forward. So thank you for taking action. If we can accelerate it faster, that would be great, because the rents are going up, the prices of everything else, as you know, and we need to take action, and appreciate you doing this tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I see no more public comment. Oh, okay.
Hello, my name is Jeff Templin, AFSCME Treasurer, Daly City employee. And
I'm going to ask you to speak up a little bit.
My name is Jeff Templin. I'm the AFSCME Treasurer, also a Daly City employee. And I just want to commend you for also bringing this forward. And we are in full support of figuring out something. We all know how hard it is to survive on the generous wages that we make. to make $12 an hour, $13 an hour. I can't imagine trying to buy groceries and support a family. I couldn't even support myself, I don't think, on $13 an hour. So we just commend you, and we thank you for bringing it forward, and we're here to support you in any way we can.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for the public comment. So at this point, is there further discussion from my colleagues?
I'm in full support. I think we should move forward with the recommendation
Okay.
by Councilmember Sylvester.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Given what I've heard tonight, and I kind of made this recommendation earlier, but in thinking back in retrospect, as per one of the comments that I heard, I'm just providing a slight history. I know that then Senator Leno had to acquiesce and give in to something because he wanted this to be more aggressive. But it's just a comment. But and I appreciate 15 by 20. And I've heard that before, but I think our city needs some time to digest all of this, but we will get to 15 before the state mandate of 15 by 2023. So it's not like it doesn't mean anything to me in the sense I can't get to 15 by 20, but had we had begun this process last year, when I first brought it up, perhaps we would not be at this stage today. So we will have to do something, but at the same time, I respect our city that we have to take it in steps, but we are going to take those steps. Thank you.
Councilmember Christensen.
If we move ahead with this, we need to deal with the impact on our budget. We don't have any more income, so what's going to be cut? Where's the money going to come from? And I think before we make any final decisions, we need to consider that as well. You can't pay what you don't have. So
Gotcha.
I want to see the source of where the money's coming from.
So do we have the numbers run now? I know you said you needed about 15 minutes.
Yep, we have them.
Okay.
So the $12 numbers remains the same. So that's
Yeah.
110,000. We're going to abide by the state. The $13.50 is 370,000. That's annually. And then moving it to $15 would be $600,000 annually. And right now, I believe our Director of Finance would say that that money would come from our general fund.
Yes, the money will be coming from the general fund reserve.
So can you repeat those numbers again for the 12, the 1350?
Sure. For 12, $110,000 annually. 1350 is $370,000 annually, and $15 is $600,000 annually.
And that includes the 30,000? No, it does not.
It does not. Those includes wages only.
So then on all of these, one would have to add,
Up to 30,000. I think the other
30,000.
cities don't
So-
necessarily spend that every year, but
yeah, the 1350 would go to 400,000 then? And the $15 an hour would go to 630,000.
it is possible that it would be an additional 30,000, so correct.
Certainly in those probably first couple
Those
of
first years, right?
So we have to think about where our hearts are, but we also have to think about where our money is. I don't know if we're in a place where we can do that. I'm not sure.
So just for information for the council is when we balance the budget for the current fiscal year 2019, we dip into the general fund reserve of 4.7 million. And when we balance the budget for the fiscal year 19 and 20 for the next fiscal year, we dip into general fund reserve of 6 million here already. So in this general fund reserve, we have a potential deficit of 10 million for the next two fiscal year, unless we see additional revenue coming from the true ballot measure, the business license tax, and the TOT, that might have some possibility that we reduce the deficit in the general fund reserve.
So I'm thinking we may want to hold off enacting this until after we see if those tax initiatives pass. I'm not sure, because you said I didn't quite get it. It's 4,700,000.
4.7 million in
4.7
2019 and 6
But that's
million.
what? What is that number?
So we use the general fund reserve, so that means we tap into general fund reserve. We have a deficit in the general fund budget of 4.7 million in the current fiscal year. So in order to balance the budget, we transfer 4.7 million from the general fund reserve to the general fund budget.
We've already done that.
You already done that already.
So then we're adding this money to that, which would leave us how much in our general fund reserves?
So I'm looking at very preliminary number here is if I'm looking as of today right now, if I transfer another $100,000 in the current fiscal year, so the general fund reserve is about like 18 million. It's a rough number because we have not finished closing the book. So that will be equal to around 21% of the general fund reserve in fiscal year 2019. And for fiscal year 2020, if I have to transfer another $370,000, so the general fund reserve is roughly around 11.8 million. So that's equal to around 13% of the general fund reserve.
So that's already below our projected
Yes, it's
safety
projected
net.
as of right now. But if we get the ballot measure approved, most likely the reserve will be going back to 15%.
And if the year 2021, the $600,000 or $630,000 for 2021,
Assuming that the ballot measure was not successful,
yeah.
then we have to dip another $600,000 to the general fund reserve. So the general fund reserve will be roughly around 10.5 million. It's rough number.
And what percentage is that?
So I would say it's around 12.5.
12.5.
It's slightly below 15%.
Right, and how many days of city functioning is that? You know my favorite question.
It's around 1.3 to 1.4 months.
Okay, 1.3 to 1.4 months.
So Lawrence, with the anticipation of the ballot measures hopefully passing, with a hotel tax, you're saying how much is that in total if it were to pass, and also the business license?
Let me double check my record.
Okay, thank you.
And those are all sort of iffy things because they depend on other people's businesses. You know, are people going to be
The
selling
current-
marijuana? Are they
as far
going
as
to
the
be building hotels?
Current hotels that we have, the motels and hotels to date. And then we do have, hopefully, the other hotels in the pipeline, but that's further down the line.
I just pulled out the PowerPoint presentation for the study session. So I'm still looking for the TOT ballot measure, but for the business license, we are looking at a 10% increase. So the 10% increase, the rough estimate is around $420,000. So that is enough to cover the $13.50 increase. I'm double check on the TOT. So for the TOT, roughly we're looking at around
630? I seem
around
to recall.
around $600,000 increase in TOT.
600,000.
600. So it's TOT 600, and then the business license is around 400. It's around $1 million increase in the city revenue. So that is enough to cover, assuming that both bond merger approved by the voter in November.
And that does not
you.
include short-term rentals.
It does not include short-term rental, just the
Yes.
hotel.
Right, yet.
Not yet.
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
I should have said that. Yet.
So, and that doesn't include the new development hotels down the pipeline. It shouldn't, I mean, we're not in the,
The 600 is include the proposed hotel. The current hotel will bring in roughly is around $300,000.
so it
And then the new
does-
hotel is around $300,000, so the two combined is $600,000.
And which new hotel is that? The
The
one by the
JS
BART
BART
station?
station, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got
I
it.
think that's the most
So-
likely one to be built. The other one, I'm skeptical.
Okay. Thank you, I appreciate it. So that's good clarification. So it does include the hotel by
Hotel, yes.
Daly City
Uh-huh.
BART, but yet there's also down the pipeline, hopefully, the one in Ceremony and the one close to Ceremony. So thank you for facilitating those numbers. Okay, so at this point, there is direction from the council. I also just want to make a comment. I want to respond to one of the comments around the 2020 increase. Definitely understand the need for expediting it. And we are definitely trying our best, as you've heard right now, around where we're at in finding ways to support the city as well as workers. There is ballot measures coming down the pipeline to increase our revenue, and the proposal that we have is expedited a couple of years prior to the state. And so that's something that we're looking towards supporting, understanding that the need for support for many of the low-wage workers presented in the analysis from one of the speakers earlier, that we definitely understand that. If we were to, I just need to know, if we were to raise it to, what would the dollar amount be? Or if we were to raise it actually earlier at not $13.50, but at $14, what would that be?
Let's see, the $14 an hour, that would be a $450,000 impact.
450 versus 300.
Versus $370,000.
Okay.
So it's a $80,000 difference.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment.
Councilmember Christensen.
I see a number of people who are represented by employee groups. These increases that we're talking about would be for part-time workers, workers who are not covered by a union, and so that means there's less money for you. So just keep that in mind and appreciate that, you know, you've said you support this, and we appreciate your open heart and your generosity, but you have to hold that in mind as well. If there's only so much money, and if it's going here, then it can't go here. So keep that in mind.
Okay. Any other comments? Can we just look at what that would be if it was just raised to 14?
In terms of the impact,
Yeah,
it's $450,000.
okay, 450, got it. So $80,000 more.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, so you had made mention raising it to 14 instead of 13.50?
Yes.
Can I get clarification, like the step increase?
Well, the step increase, we're adhering to the state at, which is at
$12?
$12 at
Okay.
2019, right?
Gotcha.
That's actually no change.
Okay,
What you proposed was $13.50.
okay,
Saying in 2020, 14,
okay.
and then at 2021, 15.
Oh,
Yeah.
So that's just
And
the-
when you looked at the impact on small businesses, if you're looking at how many dollars, how much money per hour per employee that goes up, you kind of want, if you're talking about increasing it, you kind of want to spread it evenly,
Yeah, I just.
so
wanna
there's
know
not
what
a
the
sudden
numbers are.
jump.
So to
So
be
I think
clear,
that's why Mr. Sylvester suggested the 13.50 in the first place.
so 12, 14, 15 is now what we're looking at?
Yeah, what is the? Yes.
Madam Mayor, you wanted to get the figures.
Yes.
Okay, so we got 470,000. If we chose 14,
Correct.
it's $80,000 more, I believe, from the 13.50.
Correct.
But the 15
Is 600,000.
is 600,000.
Yeah.
So subsequently, the difference between 14 and 15 is $1. 15 take away 14 is $1. It's $1 increase between the year of 2020 to 2021, and a $2 increase between.
Yeah, see, I
Interesting.
think we
Right.
need to split it.
That's interesting.
I like your original proposal better because it makes it a little gentler.
Refer to the mayor and her thoughts.
Well, my thought is just around what was mentioned earlier around how people are trying to survive, and I know you're talking about, Judith, it's the heart or whatnot, but there's a reality that's happening. It's not necessarily just the heart. There's a reality of families that are living in Daly City and working in Daly City that are trying to also remain within the city that they live and work in. And so, and that's the rationale of me expediting it faster. If we're able to help families that live and work in Daly City remain, I mean, that's something that is important.
This is why we only provided 3 options, because there's probably about 40 different scenarios. But just keeping in mind on option B, if we were to go to 14, because council's so far given the direction that we're not going to make a distinction between small business and non-small business, that would impact small businesses significantly more. It's just something to keep in mind, especially if the business license tax does pass in November. It would be a hard hit for those small businesses.
I could compromise at $13.75. So,
Okay, so if her proposal of 1375,
That'd probably be approximately 35,000.
But that's just for us. That's just
Right.
our money. That's not talking about the small business themselves. I mean, Daly City's a big business, so, if we can't come to any,
I'm
Kind
willing
of-
to support the mayor's
yeah, I
request.
know you are. But what if we have, because I don't think we have a consensus on this, then, and I want to make sure we give clear direction to staff, why don't you come to us with both of those proposals? Is that something, and then there can be a final decision on that?
Well, I think that if there is a majority that is interested in the mayor's proposal of 1375, then we should just move forward.
Well, Glenn, it's up to you. I loved your proposal. And I'm sticking with you.
Well, this makes it a little bit difficult. I'm an optimist. And Mayor, I'd have to go with the mayor. 1375. 1375. I was being very conservative, but 1375. You know, issues were brought up that, you all know this. Daly City is one of the last places to afford to live in a place other than some of the other cities that surround Daly City, such as San Francisco, Belmont, San Mateo. I'm also thinking about greenhouse gases effect. Folks who do not work in Daly City will have to commute. But the increasing of the minimum wage, maybe they may think twice and maybe will not go to another city where the wage is lower. So again, I think it's a positive effect. I think about the greenhouse gases and the reduction in traffic. We got many ballots going on right now to include SB 1 and the new transportation budget to fix our roads. But it all comes to one thing. Folks need to make money in order to live. No way should somebody have to work 2 or 3 jobs to try to make ends meet. So with that being said, I would be in favor of increasing it to 1375 the following year.
I disagree.
Okay.
I'm in the minority.
Yes, ma'am.
This is a representative government, so
Thank you, I appreciate that.
we just hope we don't lose any small businesses and then people are unemployed.
So,
Let's pray for that.
so as a recap, would the interim city manager and Stephen kind of call the question as to the direction that we are going to go, please?
So it sounds like in 2019, next year, we'd be at $12 an hour, right? So that affects small businesses because the state will already require employers with 26 or more to be at 12. Then in 2020, it's $13.75, and then in 2021, it's $15 an hour. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for all your work on this, and thank you for everyone that came today.
Okay. Is that all we have for that meeting, or do we have another one?
I think that's all we have for this meeting. Okay. Thank you.
I'm gonna have to, are we gonna go right into it, or can we stretch for about 2 minutes?
Like a couple minutes.
I got
Okay,
you.
so we'll give a couple minutes for the next regular council meeting. Thank you very much.